So you're at the right place. That's the fundraising training. And we did a survey last year at SCCAN, Scottish Communities Climate Action Network, to see what were our members wanting in terms of training needs. What did they need support with? And basically, fundraising training was one of the main demand. So obviously, for organization and community groups, we all need to raise funds to make projects and to make things happen. So this is what we're going to focus on today. And we're going to learn about, amongst other things, what makes a good project, how can you access the best support and advice for your project, how to make your activities happen, how to identify and assess a different funding option, which is the right funding source for you, the most suited. Who could be potentially a good funding partner in your fundraising effort, and what is the best way to organize yourself to make your project happen, and how should you manage your project to ensure long-term success. So yeah, those are some of the questions that we're going to try to answer today, but we're going to have 3 breakout rooms and also plenty of breaks, so it runs until 5 o'clock today. A little bit about who we are. So SCCAN, Scottish Communities Climate Action Network, also known as Transition Scotland Hub, is a community interest company. We're very much volunteer-led, although we have received some more substantial funding for regional coordinators in February 2022. And our purpose is to support community-led climate action throughout Scotland. And we're, as a network, we're a membership organization, so we welcome, and we have 400 group members all around Scotland. Some of you might be in the call, and also about 300 individual members. So if you're not yet a member of SCCAN, you're more than welcome to join. And the benefits you get when joining are things like networking opportunity, discounts at training and events, being showcased on our database of members, and other things. I'll put a link at some stage in the chat to the membership form. So that will be the agenda for today. So I'll tell you a bit about me and why I'm delivering that training today. Then we'll go into why funders give grants. Then the importance of starting with the purpose, the why, and we'll have a small group discussion. Then the importance of evidencing the needs for your project or activity that you're raising funds for. Then again, another small group discussion, followed by planning, so the big topic of planning, followed by a third group discussion, and then into the which funder, identifying the funding and the best, most suited funder, and other sources of revenue. Okay, so about me. So my name is Jean-Matthieu Gaunand, as you can see from the screen. I'm the training and engagement manager at SCCAN. I joined in January 2022, but before that, I was a network weaver. So I've got limited experience in fundraising. I've developed community projects since 2014, and I raised funds about £1 million for different community projects, and I raised funds for a project funded by the Climate Challenge Fund, the Forestry Commission, Cycling Scotland, Cycling UK, Path for All, Forestry Commission, the National Lottery, Climate Action Fund, the Heritage Lottery Fund, Energy Saving Trust, Transport Scotland, the Edinburgh Council, and then smaller other pots. So I've had a limited experience, but definitely very much focused on community climate action. And personally, I've got passion for community work, collaboration, and the environment in general. Why funders give grants? So that is the first question that we need to start with, really, because possibly we have the same, we have all the same objectives as an organization or as a funders. And please feel free to write in the chat. I'll be checking what your cause is and how fundable it is if you have come to training with that intention. Obviously, we all know that real social change and real social impact require resources, and to change the world, we need funds and resources in general. So why funders give grants? Well, they want to do good, they want to look good, and they want to feel good. That's generally the main objectives that they have. So they will have their own agenda, certainly, and a bunch of criteria. And there are common areas of needs. Well, one of them is obviously the environment and climate change, but others, such as COVID, food security, health and well-being, employability, digital literacy, access and learning, equality, etc. Those are some of the most common ones. And of course, the idea when putting together a funding application is to find synergies between those areas, and perhaps it is an environmental project that you're going to bid for, but it could also touch upon those other themes that the funders is trying to cover. So the funders want to look good, that is for sure. They are accountable for the distribution of their funds. And so it's important to understand and possibly refer to the international, national, regional, and local frameworks within which they fit. So it's always very important to look at the bigger agenda, because they themselves need to demonstrate that their funds will produce a maximum of good for a maximum of people. So your project, in a sense, at some stage, will need to demonstrate that as well. It's also a good exercise to always put ourselves in the other person's shoes. And in this case, it's see your project from the funder's perspective. So you can see that for them, your project is an opportunity to make a difference. And therefore, funders are actively looking for projects to fund, that they can't do the work themselves. They need you to deliver activities as they want to do it themselves. So yeah, they will want, of course, the funds to go a long way. But in order to make a difference on the ground, they need you. And therefore, in that sense, you'll be helping the funders with their agenda. And so it's important to understand where they're coming from and who is their kind of bigger boss. And also later on, if they do fund you, you will realize that they will put resources towards you and your project because they want you to succeed. So what you have in common with the funders is pretty much the same thing. You want to look good, feel good, and do good. Yeah, that is definitely one of the main things. So starting with the why, there are different ways to go around funding. Some people say we should start with having a look at the different funders out there and who can match best what we're looking to do. However, by starting with the why, you basically maximize the arrays of funders that you can go to, and you also don't divert from the purpose of your own organization. So the why of your projects or the activities you're trying to raise funds for is really the most important, because it is your passion and what you want to move towards. So really the first thing to figure out is to find out what is or to flesh out and be able to express what is the story behind the project you're trying to raise funds for, and behind your organization. What's your vision, and what is the main overall cause? That might be very obvious if it's a very established organization, but if it's a new organization, trying to find that initial history and initial underlying values are very key. Why do you want, and why does it matter? Why do you want to do this work? Basically, overall, what is guiding your overall work? So it's your purpose must be both simple and compelling. For example, I'll give you the example of the purpose from WWF, and I'll give you our own. So WWF works to help local communities to conserve the natural resources they depend upon, transform markets and policies towards sustainability, and protect and restore species and their habitats. So that's an example of a purpose that is both concise, and also we know that this charity does a lot of different work. Our purpose at SCCAN is to support community-led action in Scotland to address the climate and nature emergency and work for a just, thriving and resilient Scotland. So, of course, based on that overall purpose, we will have lots of different activities and different projects can spring out of that purpose, but that will always be our guiding principle, and we will not seek out funding out with the boundary of that purpose. And then behind that, you've got to figure out the story of your projects and organization. For example, the story behind SCCAN is that in 2013, a lot of climate change fund projects were coming to an end and they had no more funding. And they thought they wanted to carry out the work, carry on the work they were doing, but they didn't quite know how to. And then SCCAN was formed by a consortium of those climate change fund groups saying, okay, we want to establish a legacy beyond the funding that we've received. And so they got together, and then SCCAN was formed out of this loose consortium. So, for example, that's the story behind our organization. But is a story of what you're doing interesting? Also, that is another point. Not that is the only criteria, but it is always a plus. Is it believable, and does it resonate with people in general? If it does, then you know that you've got a good bargaining chip, so to speak. So it really is the story that matters. So it's always important to choose a simple, powerful, true story. And having plenty of pictures and videos is always a great way to display a story. So now we're going to go, oh yes, that's the slide there, which you might have seen before. So that's basically saying starting with a why is very important. Every organization on the planet knows pretty much what they're doing, what they're offering in terms of activity. Some organizations know how they do it, but only a few organizations know why they do what they want to do. So it's not necessarily about making money, or I think more generally speaking, engaging with the maximum number of people or having the greatest number of projects. That's a result. But what is the purpose and what is the belief behind the organization of the project? So we're going to have small group discussions in 15 minutes. You're going to be in rooms of 5 to 6. And you're going to have 1 minute each to kind of share the story of your project organization, which is basically fleshing out what drives you to do what you do. Yeah, feel free to include numbers and stories. And on the second part, once you've done one round, the other minutes each to share why you think this could be of interest to funders. So now let's hear back from each group, just 1 minute per group. If somebody has the guts to step in, just to reflect on, any learnings or themes that emerge from, the different ways the stories were told, or what you think might be of interest to funders, any similarities in the ways to share the story. So can we hear from the breakout room 1? I don't have the name, so you'd have to self-identify. So
I'll give a very brief thing. We were amazing. We were from Canada, from Bangladesh, from west of Scotland and from east of Scotland, with ideas for community roadshow, going around, visiting schools, trying to raise awareness, early ideas for promoting food growing and so on. And then community action in Bangladesh, health workers collaborating in Ontario, and myself in Edinburgh, looking at the need to get collaboration between more than just the little group of climate enthusiasts, to reach out to other organizations to get collaboration so that we can get civil society leadership. And that would be main reason that funders would give us money, is because we were showing that we were bringing people together to build capacity.
Thank you, David. Right, so we've talked about the why, and why having a strong story, and a strong sense of who you are as an organization, and who your community is, who you're serving, and why you're serving those people, and why it's so key to start with that. And then secondly, of course, you need to know what the needs are out there. And that's pretty much across the board. Funders are going to want to know, okay, you're saying you want to do so and so. Basically, is there a need out there for that? How do you know that's what people want? So first of all, of course, we need to know who the community is. Who is your community? Is it a community of interest, people who come together around shared values, or shared hobby, cultural background, religion, and so on and so forth? Or is it a geographical community? They live in the same town, or the same city, or same postcode? Yes, so by knowing your community, you will have heard what the problem is, or what the problems are. If not, if you haven't heard, then there's something wrong before. If you don't know what the problem in your community is, that means that maybe you need to be more implanted in the community. And but you will probably have a sense of what the needs are, which will give you insights into the underlying causes of what the problem might be. So at some point in your funding application, there'll be a bit where you will need to describe the needs of your community, and how big the problem or the problems are, both in terms of you know, the scale of the problem and the depth. How much is it affecting people? And so those needs, again, we're going to go back to it again, can be demonstrated with both stories, which are kind of the individual case studies, testimonials, etc., as well as numbers. In terms of evidencing the needs, so there are many ways that you can do that. So you obviously will need to do your research to evidence the need with stories and testimonials and stats. So there are probably some reports out there that can be done, that can be digged into. The different ways that you would evidence the needs. Of course, you have to start with your questionnaires, surveys. You can go around in your community center, in the communal spaces of your locality, and basically ask people to fill up a lot of questions, a lot of questionnaires. You will also have previous reports that you may have written, and that's where we will go back to that, but evaluation of your project becomes your new evidence of needs. So dig into your own previous reports, as well as reports from the council, you know, from independent research tanks, and as many reports that demonstrate that there is a need for that generally. That will always make your case a stronger case. Then using case studies and numbers. Again, you can find that from your own previous reports, from surveys and focus groups, and video testimonials is also a great way to put across a message. Another one is partners' statements, letters of support. So letters of support just shows that you're not alone to do the work, and where you've got strengths, another partner may have a bit of a weakness, and vice versa. You may have a weakness where a partner can really bring in another strength in terms of strategic delivery of your activities. Of course, adding pictures and local paper articles and social media, your own social media, all that will help to show that, okay, you're addressing a need and there is a need out there in the community. And you can also use that as an opportunity to show the funders how embedded, relevant and far-reaching you are in the community. When the funder will be faced with two similar applications, they will fund the organization that has the most chance to deliver. So therefore, who is the most embedded in the community and who knows the community the best. So also with social media and all the videos and pictures and local papers, clippings and everything, this is an opportunity to pass on the feel-good factor. The funders are just like you. They are you and me, and they are as much interested in the numbers as well as the emotions that are conveyed through stories and pictures and everything. Also, you can, as we mentioned previously, you can refer to reports which are more of an international, national or regional scale, as well as census data, reports, strategies, policy, as well as media in general. Those will indicate some trends and what are the current issues. Also, consulting people such as parents, carers, family, community members, asking them questions, whether formally through a questionnaire or a survey or via discussion. Sometimes you get a better sense of what the problem is through an informal chat. Also, the council strategic plan or community planning partnership is a great place where you can find a need in the area. And so you can use that resource to really get a glimpse and an idea of what are the local issues and priorities. And also you can always name the council as a source. A few tips on the project needs. Obviously, the stronger the need in the community you can capture, the better you can evidence its intensity, the more competitive your application will be. All funders, of course, they are competitive processes, and you'll be bidding, and other organizations will be bidding probably for the same pot. So they'll be looking for the most competitive, the one that will offer the best value for money. So meaning reaching the most number of people and doing a maximum of good with that. Secondly, yeah, how's your social media website, as well as your general reputation amongst partners, amongst the city or the village or at the regional level. Yeah, do they demonstrate engagement with the community? Funders will have a look at that. Yes, as I said earlier on, focusing on your project first and then find the right funders, rather than trying to fit what you're doing into a funder that might not be right for you. So that's where, when you have identified why you're doing what you're doing, and then you've identified the needs, first of all your activities will kind of naturally flow from that. But also, that means that you won't need to just apply to one fund. You won't be able to apply to just one funder, but there's a number of funders that will be available to you that you could apply, and you'll have to do only minor tweaks. And of course, needs evolve. So pay attention to the trends and the news. How does your project fit into the bigger picture? In your application, you can always reference to the UN sustainability goals or other kind of bigger frameworks that you know the funder is interested in. And current situations such as, post-COVID, and the recovery and digitalization, the refugee crisis. All those are very are going to be able to feed in, and the funders will also prioritize application to what according to what they think is the most relevant. We do have another small group discussion, which is now 3 minutes to share who your community is. Again, define who they are, what their needs or problems are, at least the one that you know, and also explain how you know what their needs are. Is it through previous works that you've done? Is it through the general members that come to your activities? Sure, Callum. Yeah, no, thank you. Absolutely. Partnership, as I briefly touched upon, yeah, can be very helpful in terms of strengthening your application and showing that not only you have a good reputation, you know how to work with other organizations, and you probably find ways to make the best of each other's strengths and good points. So yeah, absolutely. I hope your discussion went well. And yeah, would love to hear from the different groups, breakout groups. So perhaps there are again similarities or themes that emerge in terms of strategies you use to evaluate your community's needs, or maybe things that you hadn't thought about that you want to share, or any question you may have. So, but this time we're going to do it more in a popcorn style rather than going room by room.
So for us in our room, we were thinking about, today we're talking about the beginning of a project, when we're trying to get the juice going and the funding to start it so we can employ somebody and so on. But what the funder is always looking for is some success stories. So in a way, the success stories are often in the form of a report, and you have quotations from somebody who has benefited from the project. In one project I was involved in, we were asked to make a little video to be different, but it was a personal testimony about the benefit that I had achieved from participating in that project. And that was very good music to the ears of the funder. So if we track back to the beginning, what we want to do is to start penciling in, suggesting that from our pilot project, we maybe went to just one school. In the case of Jennifer, she's going to do a roadshow. She's wanting funding for going to lots of schools. But maybe you try it in one school to see what works. And then you can get some quotations from the children in that school. That would be very, very much more compelling than a theoretical list of the needs, that is from academic research or something. If it's people related, it's much more powerful. So there was just some suggestions that came from our room. How about Mike?
All those things, visitors book, or even feedback from events and engagements or pictures. You do basically, it's one stone, three birds, because you are collecting testimonials for your future funding. You're also getting motivation for the organization and feedback as to how you're doing and how you're responding to those needs. And also you are you can post those things on social media and again attract more, gather more attention and more people to come to your activities and organizations. So yeah, and anything like that is obviously very, very good. Obviously, we've talked about, well, the reason why you exist as an organization, why you want to do that project. You know your community and what they need, and basically naturally ideas for objective and activities will rise after you've sensed and researched the needs in your community. And so planning, of course, will take the major part of your work, although researching the need, doing surveys, that will also take months, depending on the scale of your project and what you're intending to do. But certainly, planning will also take a major part of the work. So it's important during that phase, as well as during the kind of consultation phase that precedes it, to meet with your team, with your staff with your other staff, your board members and volunteers, to develop the project. So before, when we're talking about exploring the needs, we want to meet with parents and community members, but also it's important to meet internally with the team and your service users as well. And that way you will flesh out the timeline of the project, when you intend to start, what are the milestones you intend to have, and more or less that exercise will be you'll be able to use any info that you get from that exercise for different funders again. So basically that is those objectives and activities relate to what you're aiming to do, for who, and how will this impact the community. So the triple W, if you want, what you're aiming to do, who is it for, and how will it impact them. So we know that funders won't fund activities. They will fund an idea or a project that will solve a problem. So if you want to fund a sewing club, etc., that's fine, but really you should think of it differently. Think of it, what is the outcome I'm trying to reach by funding this sewing club? And that's what you should put on the front foot. For example, how will it engage the disengaged? That is very kind of typical, common one. So funders will fund outcomes, which is difference your project is going to make. What has changed for the better? And your outcomes need to use, preferably use active language like improve, expand, develop, increase, more, better, less. So, and also be smart. I'll go back to that slide, but SMART, you may have heard of that anagram, which is basically S for specific. So your outcome should be specific, measurable, attainable. So it's neither an underestimation or an overestimation. Relevant, so both relevant to your either community of interest or geographical community or by your region. And time-based, okay, by when will you have achieved it? Going back to the last slide, for example, 30% more children have access to a balanced meal 5 days per week. This is a SMART outcome. It has all the ingredients of specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Also, in terms of the budgeting, which is quite an important part of the project. Are you looking at a £10,000 project, £100,000 project, £500,000 project? All those things will mean that the planning time needs to be proportional to the scale of your project. But meet with your team again to define costs, staff costs, management and admin costs, etc. Here are some tips on activities and outcomes. So, value for money. Funders will always look for the project or the organization that will bring the most value for the money that they're spending. So just do the math on the number of people impacted, how much they have been impacted, and compare this to how much you're asking. So, for example, if you're asking for £100,000 worth of funding, how much value will you bring? Would it bring an equivalent amount of value? Some organizations will also like to say, okay, for every £1 invested in the community, there is, £4 worth of outcome and externalities. Not necessarily going to that extent where you can measure in monetary value everything, but that is also something that if you are able to do, or if you have access to reports and resources that enable you to do that, can always help your case. It also shows that you've done your homework. Yes, you're asking the funders to fund your project and your organization. So again, putting yourself in their shoes, ask yourself, would you fund your own organization for that work? And the answer should be yes. Another one is you might want to formulate the aim at the end of the project, and it may take some time and iterations and revisions to come to an aim which satisfy the organization and the staff, and that is in line with the overall purpose of the organization. You can have, of course, different aims, but sometimes less is more. By wanting to do lots and lots of things because we think that it's going to be impressing the funders, actually it also shows that perhaps you will lack capacity in reaching all those aims. So perhaps focus only on a few aims. And then the last tip is around thinking long term. What are you trying to achieve longer term? How does it again fit with your original purpose? The funding at some stage is potentially going to come to an end. Will the needs have disappeared or been met permanently, or will there still be another way to meet them? Will you still need funds at the end of the funded periods, or will it be self-sustaining through some sort of social enterprise or other sources of income that the organization can attract? So yes, the impact of the funding should be as clear as possible, and also defined in time. How long is it going to impact the community for? Is there any points or question on this topic of planning activities, objectives and outcomes? Evaluation is how will you measure the impact of your project, and that is again a key part of being able to show that you've made a difference in your community or in the environment that you're doing, or for example, even if it was a capital cost and you wanted to renovate a community building, how your building is being used, etc. Very important, and is kind of a little tip here, to integrate evaluation into your activities and not think, okay, at the very end of the project, we're going to go back and ask all the participants what their thoughts was and their feedback on the different activities they took part in, because that is going to be very time consuming and not very easy. Also remember, when you have this evaluation and the feedback you get, you can also generally, write little case studies, little stories, little blog posts, social media posts, and that helps you to attract more people for the future. So yeah, integrate evaluation into activities is always great. That's why it also says evaluation. The next point is evaluation is fundraising, because the impact of your project currently, or what your organization is doing, is an evidence of need for your next project. So yes. More generally speaking, outcomes, as we've seen, need to be measurable. That was a big M of SMART. So indicate how you will measure your outcomes. It must be simple, streamlined, and efficient enough for you, so that it's seamless. As was mentioned before, previous projects and annual reports will be an evidence for the new project. Plan your evaluation carefully so it is easy to implement, and think of how you can integrate evaluation to the activities. And to boost your application, measure other indicators, that are not necessarily the direct impact you were hoping to have, but one activity may have different outcomes and positive impacts, and that might serve you to have this information for future funding, such as, did it alleviate poverty? Did it help with mental health? Did people gain employment as a result of taking part in your organization by volunteering or by networking with other people? So yeah, all that is quite important. So we said we would talk about partnership, and here we are. So partnership, there are so many benefits to working in partnership, but in the lens of fundraising, well, it's unlikely, first of all, that as an organization you will meet all the funders' priorities. Not that you necessarily, a project need to meet all the priorities, but it might be a good strategy, especially if the funding is competitive, to make an ally with somebody else and go jointly to the funders. So it is a way to meet more of the funders' priority. So that is certainly that. It will also help to divide time in planning for the bid, as well as divide expertise. Not all organizations have the same expertise. Again, it will be helpful in terms of measuring outcomes, and maybe different organizations work with different communities or community groups. And also partnering with other organizations will inspire confidence in the funders, as they will see that you are a trusted organization with an extensive network and reaching to a variety of communities. So yeah, in terms of practically, what it may mean for your application is that you get letters of support from your key strategic and delivery partners. That can add real great strength in your application. It also shows that it's not just somebody who was behind a computer typing up words, but actually there's been actual work in planning your project, and that it's well thought through. By the way, SCAN is happy to be a supporting organization or a partner of some sort on projects if you are interested in working with us in the future. Obviously, it will be case-by-case basis. So moving on to the timeline of your project, which we slightly touched upon. Of course, fundraising is work. So this is not something you do by snapping your finger and the application is all written up. So we have to plan our time when fundraising, and planning time is greater the bigger the projects. So basically, again, if you are just doing an awards for all £10,000 application, perhaps it doesn't need to be a lot of planning. Perhaps just actually attaching previous reports and different testimonials would be sufficient, and writing up should be pretty much most of the time you'll spend on developing the project. But of course, if it's a much bigger application, then the writing is a shorter bit, and the consultation, the planning, etc., will take most of the time. It's important also, we're all very busy community workers, to block time to do it. You know, cash is an essential resource for the organization for the good work to happen, and time is limited. Therefore, it's good to plan ahead and block time in your calendar just to do it. Maybe every month, or maybe every few months. But yeah, don't leave it to the last minute to write a slapdash application. So, establishing a timeline for planning and research, which is probably the biggest chunk, writing the application, and then getting ready, and also having a date for the project start, the date for the hiring. We move more onto the milestones. Date for launching and communication. How you're going to do your evaluation if you are not going to do it on an ongoing basis, and then also time for report writing, and then of course there's most probably going to be an end date to your project. Yeah, so the larger project, the longer the planning phase. And another little tip is the best time to raise funds is when you don't need it, because you don't feel pressurized to do something that is not aligned with your organizational values and purpose. And therefore you can really have time to consult, think through, and find the best funders that is most suited for your needs. Before we move on to that, also another little tip, to boost your application, you can measure other indicators of projects, as we mentioned. And there is a good evaluation tool called the Richter scale, which I will be linking on our follow-up documentation afterwards. So let's go into the last of our small group discussion, which leads us to which funder. You know, that is a key bit, but that comes at the end for a specific reason, is that even though the focus of the whole training session is, you know, give techniques and strategies and everything to be better and to be more effective at attracting funds for your organization and activity, this bit comes at the end, because if you haven't sorted out the previous things, particularly I would say the evidence of need and knowing what's needed out there, it's hard to come to that bit and knowing where to look and how to find. Having said that, on funders' website, you will always find case studies and previous projects they've funded, which is very, you know, can be very helpful in terms of guiding your work and giving you ideas for what to do and how to do it. So, which is why the first bit is to, the first little tip is to find similar organization to you and see what is their funding structures, who are funding them. And that can be probably seen on their published accounts or in their active projects section. And following up from that is reaching out to similar projects and organizations to see how they are funded if you can't find it on their website. You know, I invite you to again have a look at SCCAN's members map and reach out to other members for peer support. As a network, this is our purpose, to try to establish those relationships. And in fact, I mean, third sector, that's from personal experience. Third sector organization, they all know we're in the same boat and will seldom say no for a quick mentoring advice meeting, or, you know, you know, asking them for some tips on how they did things. And it can also be a way to ask for an introduction to a funder. You know, generally funder have got development officers who everybody's very busy, of course, but funders are also often on the lookout for the next round of funding and next potential projects. Which funder? So we did talk about earlier on about the relationship with the funders. So attend networking events, and you know, at those networking events, you can again have some ideas, and potentially there are some funders out there who could be suited to what you're looking to do. Look for funders at those events, and also funders will put together their own events to showcase, you know, the next round of funding, or sometimes, like it was the case for the CCF, there's a yearly kind of CCF gathering where you will see snapshots of different projects and how they've done things. So again, attending lots of those events, which wasn't possible during COVID, but now it's starting to be possible again, is a great source of both inspiration and contact. Yeah, whether directly to funders or to other organizations. Do research on the funding out there. Use filters within the directories. I mean, that is pretty basic, but you know, those filters help you to find out exactly what will be relevant to you. And you can check out both national and local funding, small and big, private and public. And then you can make your own database of relevant funders to you. And then once you've done that, you know, put dates in your calendar for the opening and closing dates. So it's all about, you know, trying to think creatively and prioritize the funders who are most likely to fund you. So one consultation can lead to different applications to different funders. So it's not because you've got one project that it necessarily will only be one application. In fact, it's best to say that this very project, with this very project, we will apply to a number of funders. Not all the funders will be right for you. So only find out the ones which are going to be the right ones. You will certainly have to adapt your project to be the right fit for the grant you are seeking. Each funder will have their own criteria and their own way of doing things, their timelines, their way to report, and what activities they're most likely to fund. So yes, there will be some adaptation necessary, especially if with that one project you apply to different funders. But that's even more, that's why it's even more important to have the project quite solidly grounded into the community's needs and to know exactly what you want to do. Also, when researching the funders, see what they've funded in the past. What projects have they highlighted? That means if they have highlighted this project, it's probably a very great success story that they are proud of. So that means there's something there that they are likely to fund again, possibly, that they like at least. Do your homework, of course, on their criteria. What is their focus of work? And again, about the relationship. You know, funders will have their own workshops and events, and try to take part in their activities, get to know them, understand the way they speak, the terminology they use, and, you know, ultimately in the application, you'll have to try to speak their language that they understand. Some people use outcomes, some people use objectives, some people find a distinction between the two, some people don't so much. So yeah, it's all about trying to speak the same language. Also, once you've identified it, early on, you can, you know, pick up the phone and call them to run your idea past them, and they can give you basic feedback, and you'll get a good feel for what type of project they're after. I think it's quite important to break the ice quite early on so that you don't engage in a very long consultation process if you know that you're not starting on the right footing. And having a meeting with them can also be very helpful in order to listen to them and understand what they care about. Even if they say no to the initial idea or the expression of interest, their feedback can be helpful for other funding applications. So establishing a contact and building a relationship with the funders and developing a relationship will be very important to do early on. And that will also enable you to become their ally. Remember, you and them both want the same thing, is to have success stories and great impact on the ground. And fundraising is a process of feedback and correction. Nobody gets it right the first time. Today was the first time that I did this fundraising training, so it probably wasn't perfect. But again, the next time we will do it, I'm sure it will be better. So here's some tips on the kind of identifying funders and funding in general. So we did talk about why it's important to think about your projects first and what you want to achieve, rather than running after which criteria you will fit in and which funder will be right for that. That way, if you get rejected, you don't have to repeat the whole planning phase for another funding. So we want to work smart. So one project, try to do as many applications, let's say 5 applications per project. So it's easier to adapt the same application 5 times than obviously to write 5 different applications. This also means that you will be ready when the new funding opens all of a sudden. As we mentioned earlier on, you can look wider than strictly environmental funding, because most non-climate funders are more and more looking for climate aspects of their work. And so if you are working in a community where, for example, you work a lot with young people or elderly people, or I don't know, LGBT community, then some funders might be able to fund your project and the climate aspect as well. So look for variety, apply for a variety of funding. Different funders can fund different aspects of your project. So even though you might have one project, 2 different funders can fund 2 aspects. That's what happened with my previous work at LREC. We had the Climate Change Fund funding a number of activities, and now with the National Lottery Fund, we basically have all the waste activity are funded by the National Lottery Fund, and then Path for All and Transport Scotland are funding another recycling branch, the recycling activity. Match funding is also well regarded. If you've had a funding approved from a funder, the other funders will say, okay, this organization is worth funding. It is worthy of getting more fund to deliver the project. So yeah, match funding is also a great strategy. Don't ask, don't get. That basically is a bit of motivational message, but you will be rejected. Of course, it's quite likely that if you don't get rejected, you probably don't apply enough. So it's all about being tenacious and not taking it personally when you are the one who wrote the application and it gets rejected. So the funder's vision might differ from yours. There are other funders out there which vision might be aligned to yours. Yes, there's this little quote here which I like. If you're not embarrassed by the first version of your product, you've launched too late. So it's better to submit an application and get feedback, even if it's a no, than not getting it through at all. So those links and those sources of funding I will be sending as part of a follow-up. So, but those are some of the sources of funding that are, you know, great resources to look at, you know, what could be suitable for you. So let's start with the National Lottery Awards for All. It's an easy £10,000. I say easy, I mean, don't quote me on that, but you know, this is quite a small pot. Therefore, it can be also used for consultation, where you need to collect your evidence of need for a bigger project. Maybe you don't need to apply for the £10,000 as well, but it can cover your time to design the project, also for kind of food at events, photographer, or to deliver the consultation, or it could just be a smaller version of your bigger project that you envision. Also note that the council monies might not be listed on the directories, so it might be useful to sign up to local newsletters. At SCCAN, we also try every month to send a newsletter and to write the funding that has recently opened, because different funders have different timeline. Lush Foundation, again, that's a charity grant that is, you know, quite a small pot, but again, that can be always helpful to apply to those smaller pots. Postcode Trust, Chains to Flourish, Chains to Connect, and Chains to Study. Those three funds were quoted by the fundraising strategy training that we did with Truffle Pig, that we did, I think, a year ago. And this was basically an experienced professional fundraiser whose job is to fundraise for different organizations. And they were saying that those three funds tend to be undersubscribed. I'm not sure if they're currently open because I haven't checked them, but yeah, I just mentioned those because she did mention it. You also have, of course, trusts and foundations, which are other options, you know, the Robertson Trust and different ones. But starting with the directories would be, I mean, the directories already have those other name. We also have the SCCAN. I'd like to plug in our own community learning exchange. So if you're a community group, if you're a member of SCCAN, the community learning exchange is a small pot of around £750 to visit another organization whom you want to learn from. So the idea is that this cross-pollination of knowledge and that somebody's expertise can trickle down and be cascaded down to the rest of the SCCAN membership. So if you have an expertise, for example, if you are a tool library, or if you are a remakery, or if you have, I don't know, if you manage a pool of electric bicycles, you can apply to this community learning exchange and basically share your knowledge and experience with others. And we also have the storytelling grants. That's our own grant for to help you to capture stories through podcasting, writing, workshop writing, kind of blog posts, and just capturing stories in general. So stories of success, stories of change in your community. Again, I'll send a follow-up email with all the links to those. It's good always to diversify revenue and find other sources of funds. Grant fundraising is one way to fund your activities, but there are other ways as well. So individual donations is a great way. During your events and activities, you can ask for donations for your from your active members, however big or small. So you might find that some person might become a major donor, but yeah, donations are little help. Another one, which is sell your services, training and consultancy. So yes, your organization or your group might have expertise already within their board members, within their staff or volunteers, and you might already be very good at something which you might be able to monetize, which might help you to fund more activities to make a greater difference. So if you are a not-for-profit, that will really be redirected to the community. So this is all good work. In-kind donations, such as software, laptop equipment, these kind of things. It could also be a venue. I remember there was I think, Living Memory Association in Edinburgh had some agreement with a space, and they were basically getting quite a nice rate on the space because of the good work they were doing. So again, in-kind donation is a good way to find some resources to fund your work. Crowdfunding. This is good for urgent, immediate asks of a few £1,000s. Again, in those ones, the scales are quite different because you really need to be spot on the story and have lots of images and pictures and give updates. But however, it can be quite a good source of funding for emergencies in the community. Sponsorship from basically, it can also be combined with match funding. Major donors, again, giving grants. So I have to note that Network or Social Change are giving their grants in February. And that's basically the idea of being matched with a philanthropist. Fundraising events, challenges, again, such as the very famous Ice Bucket Challenge. But again, there are many different things that can be done in terms of fundraising events and challenges. It can be a gala dinner, it can be just a fun race, a bike challenge, or any sort of events that will raise both the profile of the organization as well as funds. And then investments and loans, which are, again, available. That might not be what you're looking for, but that might also help you to get an activity started, especially if it's an income generating one. So here are some other resources, which again, I'll be able to send across your way. So in 2013, we developed a funding route map, which was a very relevant and useful tool for new and established groups. And there's the SCVO guide to finding funding. The session which I mentioned earlier on with Phyllis Martin from Truffle Pig. Again, you can have a look at that. And they also have their own Facebook group with different funding deadlines. Also, recently the Scottish Community Alliance has relaunched their Accelerate program, formerly called the Enterprise Accelerator, to support groups starting their first income generating projects. So again, very relevant. As a training and engagement manager at SCAN, my role is also to advise and support you in whichever way possible as a community group SCAN member. Therefore, if your objective is to raise funds, I'm happy to advise and support you in doing that. We also offer other trainings, and that can be bespoke and in person. That's on an ability to pay basis, so there may be a cost for it. But yes, hope you enjoyed today's session, and wish you best of luck for your fundraising journey.